Welcome everyone to another episode of Revolution Recap. Since we last checked in, the SuperDraft came and went with the Revs using 3 of their 4 draft picks. This effectively finishes their offseason shopping as the team heads into preseason. I am Greg Johnstone. Joining me today from the bent Musket and the great state of Connecticut is Jake Catanese. Jake, how is it going?
Happy New Year, buddy.
I'm starting out 2020 being pleasant and giving a compliment to Connecticut, but
there's a lot of reasons to be pleasant in New England, including being pleasant to Connecticut, because it has been a exceptional off season.
That is true, and we'll get into kind of your assessment of the offseason a little bit later, but it's been very positive so far, and it's very strange to start up preseason with the coach kind of saying, yep, we're ready to go in, we have our roster set, we're ready to go into training. Last year, Carlos Heel came in kind of last minute. They kind of talked about bringing in some players. I know they had the mystery trialist that everyone knew who it was last year in preseason, so it's kind of weird with our roster pretty much set and ready to go, and I guess now it's just waiting for actual games to start. Before we jump into that, we should jump into the SuperDraft, which happened between last episode and now. Obviously headlined by the pick of Henry Kessler out of Virginia, drafted 6th overall. That was the draft pick that the Revs acquired from Kansas City as part of the Christian Nemeth deal. Henry Kessler is a junior center back, anchor of the best defense in the country. They conceded 13 goals in the regular season. He was a semifinalist for the Herman Award, first team All-ACC, and a Generation Adidas player. Some people consider him one of the best central defenders in the draft, if not the best. Jake, what are your thoughts on Henry Kessler, and how pumped are you about this pick?
We have been touting in the now defunct SB Nation soccer mock drafts. I had been wanting center backs for years since AJ Soares left and was never fully replaced, and now 5, 6, 7 years after that, we finally get our center back, and it's arguably one of the best. And not only that, it's out of Bruce's well of everything soccer. The University of Virginia, Bruce Arena, an alumni, Clint P., USL coach, alumni, former left back, now college scout, Chris Tierney in the front office, also a Cavalier. Now you've got a center back, your first draft pick in the Bruce Arena era. It seems very fitting that that's where they would go, and not so much an obvious pick from where they were in the draft, but an obvious pick of center back is one of the easier positions to fill a need with in the draft. I think a lot of college center backs do very well. A lot of college defenders can do well. As much as I've loved seeing Brandon Bye, DeJuan Jones, the transition of the attacking sort of winger, wide player to MLS fullback, a true center back, a true defender, I think is exactly what this draft class needed, and the Revs went out and got it right away. And they didn't have to trade up or do anything. They got Kessler where they wanted him, right where they were at number 6.
Yeah, and allegedly the Revs were trying to move up to take Kessler. Bruce Arena and the Revolution claim that this was their number 1 pick available in the draft, which is a pretty amazing track record for the Revs, because last year I'm pretty sure they said Tayon Buchanan was their top pick on their board, and he fell to them at 9, although Buchanan was going number 1 in some drafts. And then 2 years ago, Brandon Bye was allegedly their number 1 pick, and Segbers was their number 2 pick, and both of them fell to 8 and 9. So pretty amazing that 3 years in a row, the Revs allegedly get their best player available in all 3 drafts. In this case, I think you can make a case that it's pretty believable. Kessler was, as you say, kind of out of this University of Virginia tree from Bruce Arena. He has a very good knowledge of that program. It was noted he went down to Virginia to scout Kessler, and he probably also was scouting Daryl Dike, the striker who went number 5 overall. It should be noted that Virginia had 2 potential number 1 picks overall, so it's not a big surprise to hear that they're able to get someone out of the University of Virginia. And looking at the beginning of the day, I know there's some mock drafts that had Kessler falling to 6, but it wasn't really a sure bet. I think the Vancouver Whitecaps took Brian Raposo at number 4, and that was kind of not necessarily a wild pick, but it certainly seemed like a bit of a reach, because Daryl Dike and Kessler were considered to be better players than Raposo. But yeah, overall, I think this is about as good as you could have asked for. This was the best use of a pick 2 for the roster. Looking at the center backs on this roster, we kind of talked about this last episode. You haven't really changed a whole lot. You've brought in Samba Kamara, and you've taken out Jalil Anibaba, and that's really been the only change to the center back grouping that needed some improvement, I think a lot of fans kind of felt. So bringing Kessler, bringing in a young guy, he's a person that probably won't be starting at game number 1, but I wouldn't be shocked to see him make some appearances throughout this team, for this team throughout the year. And as you said, center backs are a position that you can get some decent value out of the draft. Really, the best picks that have come out of it have been, wingers that have converted to outside backs. The occasional striker will come out, but they're really hit or miss. But center backs seem to have a pretty decent track record still in the SuperDraft, even though the importance of the center draft has been diminishing over the past few years. So, yeah, overall, I mean, if I was to grade this pick, I'd give it an A. I think this is one of the best case scenarios for the Revs coming out of the SuperDraft.
Yeah, and I think it's also as you said, like, the Revs are targeting players for, I think where they think they're going to be. Like, obviously they wanted Kessler, they were trying to move up to get him. I think particularly once you had Dylan, I'm gonna butcher the last name, Dylan Nilis out of Georgetown,
yep.
and Jack Mayer went like 2-3, and I think Mayer was a center back. I don't remember if Nilis, he's just listed as defender, which is always sort of vague. I wish they would use positions, but
Mayer was a center back out of Indiana, and he's
okay.
What I've read too is he might not be ready to jump into MLS, but he has the highest ceiling. That's kind of what I saw from people who know way better than me.
Sure, and like I said, New England, as far as drafting goes, I think New England has always been a team that's done exceptionally well in the variety of MLS drafts, and that is at some point a testament to what franchise does with the oddball budget constraints that is MLS at times. But I think once you had Kessler at number 6, we go down and Revolution make a trade and sell their pick to Nashville for some GAM money. I actually was looking at Tanner Beeson, who I think was a left back out of Stanford. He went number 12. I wonder if that's who Arena maybe wanted at that spot, and then once he was off the board, he goes, all right, who wants this pick?
Yeah, it's very possible, too, because they call timeout, which, you can do that in the MLS SuperDraft.
Yep.
There's so many moving pieces, and yeah, that wouldn't shock me if that is what ended up happening. And if you look kind of at the next pick, Simon LeKressner out of Cal, he's an outside back as well. So, that back line, center back, left back, right back, is probably the areas that they were kind of looking to strengthen with that 13th pick. But before you jump in, I just want to kind of summarize the deal overall. The Revs traded that pick to Nashville for $50,000 in allocation money, an extra conditional $50,000, depending on how well that pick does. The pick was a goalkeeper, so I'm not sure how much, he might not even play at Nashville. Might be a depth piece for Nashville as well. But considering the other trades, a lot of people say that's not a whole lot of money. But if you look at kind of some other trades that happened on draft day, the number 11 pick went for $75,000. The number 10 pick went for $100,000 in allocation money. The number 21 spot went for movement in the allocation order, which is just Philadelphia being Philadelphia. The number 3 pick overall, which was Dylan Nilis, who actually is a very, very strong prospect, was traded for $150,000 back in November. So yeah. There's not a lot of value in draft picks, it seems like, anymore on an allocation money basis. And this seems to be what the Revs could get for this pick. I'm not really that upset that they moved out of it because, as you said, I don't know if there's anyone that they were looking for.
Yeah, I mean, the only other player that I think was of note that went a couple picks later, Aaron Malloy from Penn State, I think was a holding midfielder type player. That would have been someone I said, listen, you're at 13. That was a guy who was rated in the top 10. I would grab him if you were really set on Beeson and he's not there. You move out of it. That's fine. Would I have preferred in a year you're going to start a USL 2 team to have the player to stash in USL? Yes. Does $50,000 in Garber bucks do the Revs any good this year? I have no idea because we don't actually distribute or tell what the Garber bucks are used for, so it's hard for me to tell. I would have preferred the player. I have cash. It is what it is. It's not the end of the world.
Yeah, and we don't know, but it seems like they're just selling for whatever they can get too. I mean, you know what I mean? I don't think this was a Godfather offer from Nashville. I think the Revs looked at the board and they said, I don't know. You mentioned Malloy. I just want to mention too, some people had him pretty high on their big board. Yep. Some people saw him as a top 10 talent. The problem is he requires an international spot. It was the same thing for Patrick Nielsen, who's also another.
And that I think is the one spot that I think when we're recapping the SuperDraft, we really have to focus on the fact that New England, anyone from an international spot would have been very hard for New England to pick up without trading or acquiring an international spot. Because I'm pretty sure we're close to being tapped out unless a couple of people like Mancien or Pannier or someone start picking up green cards, which Atlanta seems to have growing off of trees. So we got to talk to our visa guy up here in New England and figure out what's going on.
Yeah, I don't have the list available offhand, but I think we did the math, and it's 9 international spots right now. So they need to get some green cards, which it's rumored they're getting into it. But
those are things that you can't like, guarantee that, oh yeah, you're going to have those spots open, because I think last year they only had, I think you get 9 international spots. You can buy the 9th or trade for a 9th. I think everyone gets 8. And we kept everyone. No, we lost Caicedo 2. We added Butner and Buxka, so that was the 8 right there.
And Samba.
So now, you're looking at 9 right now already. And I don't think we've traded and got the extra spot. So either green card shenanigans, roster shenanigans are still to happen, or something else is being plotted. We're not sure.
Correct. But even still, getting back to Malloy, you pointing out that we have 9 international spots, even if you have, in theory, 2 people get green cards. Let's say Mancien gets a green card, which is rumored, and is part of the reason he came back. Let's say Wilfred Zahibo gets a green card, and he's removed. You still could make the argument that it's almost better to have an international spot open and trade that for allocation money and trade your draft pick for allocation money than to use a draft pick on a guy that you don't expect to make your team, would go play down at USL and require a you know what I mean. So it's a
and I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of USL 1 and international roster spots. I'm still dealing with the MLS rabbit hole. It's just too much.
Just to touch on the second round picks that the Revs both did use, which I was a little surprised at. I thought we'd see some movement, but it might have just been there was no takers for these picks. But the 30th pick overall was Simon LeKressner out of Cal, a right back. This pick was acquired as part of the Kai Kamara deal with Vancouver back in December 2017. So for those of you keeping track at home, that deal is now officially Kai Kamara for Simon LeKressner and DeJuan Jones, which is not totally a bad return considering Kamara.
That doesn't sound a handful of years ago as far as weird like baseball and other thing type trades. Like, listen, I don't think that's all that bad. You got the what is it, the 4th overall pick in the second round?
Yeah.
Like, that's for as far as second round picks go. I think really once you get past halfway through the first round, everything's kind of a crapshoot anyway. Getting a high end second round pick on top of everything else, that's not bad.
No, not at all. And LeKressner was a bit of a steal at 30. I know he's probably going to be slotted in at Revs II. We're probably not going to see much of him at Revs I, but considering where this pick was, he scored 5 goals and 2 assists in his senior year last year. Overall, 8 goals and 5 assists. For a right back, that's pretty good. He was a converted striker, moved back to right back midway through college. Going off of the SBI and Top Drawer Soccer big boards, which were probably the 2 best sources I saw going into the draft, LeKressner was rated as the 18th best prospect for SBI, 29th for Top Drawer. Overall, they had him as the 5th best right back on the board. So provides a little bit of depth there to a spot that I think could use it. And considering the struggles of Andrew Farrell and Brendan Bye, LeKressner seems to be a bit of an offensive-minded player. So I know DeJuan Jones might move over to right back and he might add a little bit of offense to that side of the field. But LeKressner certainly seems to be another option if the Revs want to go that way. And then one more pick too, the 43rd pick, Keegan Meyer out of High Point, former walk-on, 27 shutouts in his career. He was first team All Big South 3 straight years. He was ranked as the 3rd best goalkeeper on the board by SBI and Top Drawer Soccer, 37th best prospect overall by SBI, 48th by Top Drawer. So still it seems to be pretty decent pick. Jake, do you have any thoughts on these second round picks, and do you have any expectations for them?
I really like the depth that LeKressner has, and I hope he gets a very good shot at the USL level, because you're right, he is that sort of offensive minded fullback type, and so fullback type is weird because instead of a converted winger, he was a literal striker. Like we're not talking about someone who was an outside a wide speedster. Like no, he was more of like I'm going to be a in the box partner striker type player. Now I'm just playing right back. So that's a much different skill set, I think, than something that Jones or Bye have offered. And both of those guys, I think, do different things. I always sort of am a little bit wary about Brandon Bye going forward, but athletically, him and Farrell have been just so dominant in just catching people that you can hide some of the fact that, well, they're maybe not great actual defenders. That's okay. DeJuan Jones, actually, I think, was far more natural at the adjustment. So LeKressner certainly seems to fit that mold, and he's already got a year of that in college. The only thing interesting for me for Keegan Meyer at goalkeeper is probably going to USL level. That's perfectly fine. But you had former Revs alum Austin Aviza from UConn Syracuse / Providence, because he transferred around a lot, going right behind him to Orlando at 18. And I am Not going to ask the question of what happened there because it's none of my business, but I think that's a very interesting moment in the draft. There was Austin Avisa going one pick right behind Meyer.
Yeah, and a former Revs Academy product. Really kind of strange that they go back to back. I will note that Avisa was not on the SBI big board. I don't have if he was on the top drawer big board at all, but Keegan Meyer was rated higher than Avisa in both these categories, so it might be that. It also might be that you got to remember that the infrastructure of the Revs front office came in midway through the last year, and so it's very possible they're not very familiar with Avisa. Maybe they were hoping they would sign him to a USL contract. We've seen the Revs be very active in signing players to some Revs II contracts in the past few weeks. Maybe they were hoping he would go undrafted. In theory, they could still sign Avisa.
And like I said, there's a lot of extras because, again, you're talking about MLS Academy to draft, and there's a lot of mechanics and things that are going on. I don't know if there's any, whatever the relationship was between Avisa, the Academy, the front office, between everything. This is, to me, whether or not Austin Avisa wanted to come to New England, neither here nor there. This is what happens when you don't have the infrastructure in place to get your academy players from college to the pros. Having the USL 1 team and figuring out, say, hey, instead of that weird ghost U23 team that sort of played against the NPSL but wasn't an NPSL team, now we have this place, hey, you're in the offseason? Great. Come play with us for 2 months. You can hang out on the USL squad, and then you go back to college. It'll be great. Now you actually have that. You don't need, you don't have the NPSL ranks. You don't have this U23 college thing. You can just say, hey, we're going to have an academy player, an academy graduate, play on our USL team, whatever the guest player roster, whatever the heck you have to do for the mechanics on the roster. But we're going to have those players, a half dozen extra players, however many extra players now on that roster. You're going to see a lot of more academy alumni getting minutes. That could be U16 level, U18 level, college level. Now you have that mechanic where those types of players can graduate, and you're not going to have the Austin Avisas slip through and go somewhere else, Mitch Tainers of the world, things like that, where they're going and developing in other people's USL2 teams and then moving on to MLS.
Yes, although I do think, I want to correct you on something, Jake, because I think the way I understand it, if you sign a USL contract, you're no longer NCAA eligible.
No, I know there's, you know what, I have to talk to the guys down in DC because they have a whole bunch of academy guys. I don't know, again, this might be college or I don't know how it works, but they're listed as academy players, so they're not listed as professionals. There is some designation that these guys, they're not MLS players, they're academy players. They're like playing a division up. I don't know how it works. You might actually have to be the U18 team. Maybe you can't do it for the college guys. I'm not sure. But this is just another step of getting the guys who actually go the college route, getting them more minutes and getting them back to either USL or MLS. You're right. Once you sign a pro contract, you're done. There is a way to sort of fudge that in the meantime, but we're not good at that yet because we don't have those types of teams. And obviously, Red Bull's the one with the full NPSL team, U23, the whole thing. So
yeah, I'm learning a whole lot about USL and how players move, and it's been a whole headache. And
oh my God, we just occasionally, right when we think we know the MLS rules, they throw two other leagues at us, and I just can't right now.
But getting back to Keegan Meyer here, and someone made the comment earlier too, because I think who signed a keeper? I think it was Minnesota signed a keeper this week, or someone's looking to bring in a TAM keeper or a DP keeper.
Minnesota traded for the guy from LAFC, Tyler Miller.
Oh, no. You're right. They traded for Tyler. I forget who it is. Someone's trying to bring in an international keeper, and someone made the comment of, it's pretty crazy to me that people are spending all this big money on international keepers when the one position that Americans seem to develop really well is
I believe that was Real Me MP. I know the username, and I believe I tweeted out our last goalkeepers that we drafted were Robert Shuttleworth, professional gentleman of leisure from the University of Buffalo, and I think also transferred from Loyola of Maryland. Brad Knighton, UNC Wilmington, Matt Turner, the MAC Legends, Fairfield Stags, these are not high-end programs. This is not Matt Reese from UCLA in 2000. These are mid-major keepers. High Point, Keegan Meyer. These are guys coming from mid-low major type programs and are professional MLS goalkeepers, and they're good at it. So I don't know why Vito Manone or anyone else is getting signed. Looking at you, Philadelphia, and Ross Mboli. I don't know why you're spending money on those types when you can get Andre Blake in the draft. I know that's a different story, but like,
I was going to say, right? No one under the age of 30 is going to get that reference, but that's a good reference. If you look at if you go off of the expected goal metrics, the two best keepers by far in MLS last season came out of Fairfield University and Oakland University, Matt Turner and Steve Clark. So this guy, Keegan Meyer, as I say, he was a bit of a walk-on, so maybe he's a bit of a late bloomer, maybe he's learning the position, but 27 shutouts in his college career is no joke. 3 first-team all conferences. It is a small school, but there are some good track records of great players coming out of small schools and playing keeper. So,
well, Matt Turner wasn't even drafted, was he?
He was undrafted. Yeah,
he was undrafted. So yeah, I mean, like I said, there are players that you can get. Goalkeeper should be really the one position. If you want to have an international guy, or if you have an international guy who tries out and you love him and he's that good, great. That's fine. Goalkeeper to me is like the one position in this country. Listen, we have goalkeepers. I don't know where we find them. Everyone has found them. We should be exporting more goalkeepers from this league than we know what to do with, and somehow it hasn't been working out for Bill Hamid and Zach Steffens, and Andre Blake is still in Philadelphia. I don't know how someone hasn't snatched him up on a big transfer. But yeah, those are the ones position where I'm like, I don't know why anyone would spend an international roster spot in this league on a goalkeeper. I'm sorry, not with the talent that's available either from college or just in the domestic ranks.
The one other thing, too, I'll say about Keegan Meyer, which is why I'm very hopeful for him. I don't know a whole lot about him. I don't know. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I know a whole lot about him. But the fact that the Revs, 1, took him over Avisa, who they do know and is in their system, and 2, just the fact that they took a goalkeeper when they have Matt Turner locked in long term. So you have your starter. You have 3 keepers, including Jeff Caldwell, who was added to the Revolution roster. I'm pretty sure he was automatically added from the waiver draft, which that's a whole other thing, if you remember my rant from last week.
I do remember your rant, and I remember checking the last time I saw a roster update from Matt Doyle like a week and a half ago. He wasn't officially on the list that he put out for goalkeepers.
So in defense of Matt Doyle, I don't mean to defend a UConn grad. But
hey.
I did check this out, and I think if you go to the Revs roster, I think it was something like Jeff Caldwell is on the full page, but if you sort by goalkeepers, he wasn't popping up. So it seems like what happened is that Matt Doyle went to their roster, sorted by position, and because that's how he did his. And for whatever reason, there's a glitch on the website. But no, Jeff Caldwell confirmed by Bruce Arena right after the SuperDraft that Caldwell was on the roster, which was a big shock to me because my assumption when they took a goalkeeper was that Jeff Caldwell was not going to be on the Revs.
I mean, right there, but it's some combination. You're looking at ideally probably the guys who are going to split the bulk of the minutes in the USL 2 side. Because you have Matt Turner as the established number 1, Brad Knighton is the established number 2. Okay, we're going to put you guys down the USL team. I don't care if you guys alternate every other week. However you want to do it in the schedule. You're going to have 2 guys now getting game minutes that they otherwise wouldn't because of the magic of the USL 2 team.
And Jeff Caldwell played at USL Championship last year, so I mean, it wouldn't shock me if he was on loan to, say, Hartford, where Cody Cropper was loaned last year, and Keegan Meyer played for Revs II.
You can absolutely do that as well. I mean, you're going to have to figure out, probably you're going to have some kind of backup down to the USL 2 level. But I think that's sort of, the interesting thing for New England, like, you're right, you have the USL, 1 league team, but you also can start, shipping a couple of guys to, USL. Maybe you've got, Renix maybe goes back down to Carolina if he wanted to go back there. If you still had, say he's not with us anymore, but you could have had Zach Haribo could have had his pick of, USL loan minutes that he could have wanted because he's been in that level and with several teams. So I think it is interesting. Now you're right. You don't have to have all of your minutes down at USL 1. You can maybe put a couple of the big Revs backup guys or the big development guys. You can put them somewhere else, Hartford, Rhode Island, when that materializes somewhere else in the league. I'd love to see where Nicholas Firmino gets minutes this year. I'm really excited to see him in particular, as well as missing whoever we just signed, Damian Rivera. Those are guys where I'm like, okay, I want to see you guys get minutes this year. I don't care where it is, but I want to see the minutes, and I want to see where they come from.
Well, enough talking about the actual draft picks. Let's get to the good part. Do you have an overall grade for the Revs SuperDraft this year?
Yeah, so we at the Bent Musket pride ourselves on originality and nonconformity. So all of us gave the Revs a B+ for the draft. It was me, Matt, and Josh. I think B plus was very solid. There were little things we didn't love. I didn't personally, like I said, I didn't love the whole Austin Avizia going right behind Keegan Meyer thing. I didn't love selling the draft pick, but you got your guys. You got your defenders. You got one of your backup keepers. You have a clear, defined path now, not just at the first level, but also behind that. Like, I see the depth chart developing. I see the back line where I go, okay, even if I move Andrew Farrell to right back or to center back, I know where other guys can get minutes. I know where other guys can slot in. This is something we've been asking these questions for several years on the back line, and now so many of them have been answered just in one off season and one draft class. And it's a very refreshing take of just, listen, we're going to do this, and then we're going to go, then we actually do it, as opposed to, well, we're really happy we took the best guys on the board, and I'm like, yeah, but where are they going to play? So I think it's a refreshing and I won't say honest, but a more direct approach that Bruce Arena has brought to the offseason and to the draft class for a team that, New England historically has always been great, I think, at the SuperDraft, and obviously with Bruce, that's likely to continue for as long as the SuperDraft is around, and I hope personally it's around for a while.
Yeah, and that's that we could go off on a whole other podcast about what the future of the SuperDraft is, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But you're right. I give them an A-. I'll be a little more kind than you. I don't mind trading away the draft pick for reasons I said earlier, that I don't really know who they would have taken there. I think Kessler can give you minutes in 2020. The only reason I'm giving them a bit of a dip to A- is that there was one guy in the draft that I think could have made an impact right away for the Revs, and that was Dylan Nealis, who we talked about earlier, the right back out of Georgetown. From what I saw, he is a really finished product, a really great two-way right back, and that seems to be one of their weak spots at right back. I know they have Brandon Vai, who is doing well, but he has some flaws. Duwan Jones could shift over from left to right, but I'm pretty convinced he's a winger. So I think if they would have brought in Dylan Nealis, I think that's a guy that potentially from day one is giving Brandon Vai competition for minutes, might be starting, a few months into the season, in my mind. But outside of that, I mean, they would have had to have traded up for the number 3 pick overall, and it seems like the Revs were higher on Kessler anyway, so I'm not going to complain too much about that. But yeah, overall, I think they got a pretty solid center back at number 6. I think the right back they got in LeKressner has a bit of potential if he can defend. I think we might get some minutes out of a second-round draft pick, which is a really, really positive thing. And then the goalkeeper, as I say, I think that's a bit of a wild card. I wouldn't have taken a goalkeeper just because they have 3 on their roster already. I'm not even sure if he's going to get signed to an MLS contract. They might just sign him to a USL contract. But overall, I think they did a really good job of fixing some needs and using these picks as well as they can. So. Jake, I'm going to ask you for another grade because last podcast, Sean and I talked about our off-season grades and our general thoughts on the off-season. Without kind of restarting that whole conversation, I wanted to see if you had a grade on the Revolution's off-season so far. I mean,
before the podcast, we mentioned the last time the Revolution had what we would consider to be a great off-season. And I had to go all the way back to 2002. To the MLS allocation/dispersal draft for the Mutiny and Fusion, when the Revs picked up Carlos Imosa, Steve Ralston, Mamadou Diallo in that draft, and then went out and got, in the first round of the 2002 Super Draft, Taylor Twellman, followed by Shalry Joseph. So in 2002, mind you, this is a completely different MLS 1.0 era. The last time the Revs had a great off-season, not mid-season, not calendar year, off-season winter was 2002. This is an A+ offseason. It is probably the greatest offseason in the history of the New England Revolution, and it's not even close. Probably the third best offseason was last year, simply because you got Carlos Gil. That's it. That's the list of good, legitimate Revs offseasons. 3 of them. And 2 of them have come in the last year. Like the Revolution and offseasons have been usually a painful or lackluster process, particularly more recently. There have been good drafts, there have been good signings, there have been good mid-season trades, but there has not been the home run after home run type of offseason that I think Bruce Arena is putting together with Alexander Butner, left back, Adam Buska, striker. Now you are seeing, okay, we have the core players. Now we're going after the big fish, to top the end of the roster, to hit those home runs, to be the 10, 15 goal scorers. And honestly, this is the first time in many, many years where all of us have been legitimately excited, I think, going into a preseason camp, because the roster is finished.
Yep, 27 players signed, and then 2 more draft picks. So we could be looking at 29 out of 30 roster spots being taken on opening day, which is a rarity to a franchise that is used to roster flexibility. So
hashtag roster flexibility. We need to put that on a T-shirt. I believe, and I have to double check the year because I could be wrong, I believe at one point, it might have been 2016, the New England Revolution started a season with 23 players. I remember having a legitimate aneurysm looking at those numbers and thinking to myself, how are you going to play an entire season with 23 players? That is like Olympic international roster size. Like, that's it. You get your first team, your second team, your 3 goalkeepers. That's it. And now here we are, a handful of years later in one off season, we have 29 spots, all the senior roster spots filled, 3 DPs, multiple TAM players. Like, it finally feels like after 25 years of the league and seemingly half of that in the designated player era that New England is now, we might be able to say they're an MLS 3.0 team. We might.
And this is a wild conversation if you consider where this team was 1 year ago.
Not even 1 year ago. 8 months ago? May, April of last year? Like, not even a calendar year ago, where this team was to now. The biggest acquisition for this team happened in May.
Jake, you ready for some listener questions?
I love listener questions. Let's do this.
All right. Well, on the backs of the SuperDraft, Cam asks us, do you think Kessler will stay with the first team? I think he'll get some minutes at the first team. I don't think he's going to be a starter. I think they brought in Samba Kamara.
This is going to be, we're gonna again mention, this is the Revs two-way contracts, NHL style, or 40-man roster. Kessler is going to be an MLS player. He's a GA player. That's guaranteed. He's probably going to play more minutes in the USL or more minutes either Revs II or wherever he gets loaned to. He's going to play more minutes or more games somewhere else. Do I expect him to get significant minutes to the MLS? Yes. He's effectively, in my opinion, replacing Jalil Anibaba. Jalil Anibaba played a ton of minutes last year. We can say that, well, it's because Mancienne was hurt. Oh, it's because De La Mea was hurt. Listen, you're going to play. You need your center backs. Your center backs so that they are a focal point of the formation. You need those guys healthy. If they're not healthy, I don't really want them playing at 80% because they're not going to be effective. He's going to get minutes. I hope he does well when he does get those minutes, because they're going to be in MLS games, and they're going to be in probably a few big games, maybe even down the stretch. So hopefully if he gets a few minutes, get his feet wet, USL or loan, what have you. But I think when he's going to be called upon, I think he'll be fine. I really do. Is he going to crack 1,000 minutes in MLS? Because that would be something like 10 or 11 games total. That might be maybe not a good thing, because that might be where other bad things have happened to get him those minutes. But could I see him getting, a half dozen starts easily? Yes.
I think a lot depends on, too, if Andrew Farrell shifts back to right back or if he stays at center back. And I think he's going to stay at center back to start the season. I think, I just, there's a lot of variables there. It's not unreasonable, but I think we'll see. And considering, too, he was an underclassman, he came out as a junior, it wouldn't shock me if we see 1 year of him at Revs II, or maybe a loan to the USL Championship to Hartford or something like that. I do want to just briefly, before, because we're going to get into this in a little bit, and I want to clarify something, because I know rosters are confusing. So, Jake, if you give me 2 minutes, I want to just explain something real quick about the rosters. A lot of people, there's a misconception going around that you can basically loan any player from Revs II up to MLS. And that's kind of true, not really. Essentially, you can only play in an MLS game if you have an MLS contract. So anyone who's not on the Revs 30-man roster cannot be loaned to the Revs. You need an MLS contract. And the reason for that is because you can't sign a bunch of players to a USL contract and pay them below the MLS minimum salary and then loan them up to the Revs for game action. You have to be making an MLS minimum salary. So, and you kind of mentioned this earlier. This is the reason I'm bringing it up. It's kind of like being on you need to be on like the Red Sox 40-man roster. So, if you're playing for the Portland Sea Dogs or the Pawtucket Red Sox, if you go up to the Boston Red Sox, you need to be added to the Boston Red Sox 40-man roster and be given a major league contract. It's kind of a similar concept here where, the Revs have signed 8 players to USL contracts. If they wanted any of those players for the MLS, they would need to sign them to a homegrown contract or a MLS contract. So I just want to kind of briefly specify that because there's just a couple of misconceptions that we can willy-nilly call up and send down players as much as we want. And we can send down players as much as we want, MLS to USL. But there's the only way you can call up a player from USL to MLS is if basically your whole team is injured.
Yeah, when I sort of make the reference of the NHL two-way contract, what I'm really saying is it's an MLS two-way contract. You are an MLS player. We can send you down whenever we want. We just can't. In order to send someone up, you need to have the roster spots. So the way the roster spots open up, someone gets hurt, someone gets puts on the season-ending injury list or the injured reserve list. That would be a time when now you can say, okay, hold on, we're going to activate one of our USL guys.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that quickly because
it's
going to be a long season of figuring out how this works.
Oh my God, the rabbit holes! We're gonna be cursing at the rabbit holes all year. We already know this because now we're adding like 7 more.
Well, so I don't know if you saw this either, but one of the Revs II signings, Ryo Shimazaki, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but he was a third-round draft pick by the Crew, who Revs II signed on a USL contract. And basically the way that works is that the Revs II can sign him to play in USL, but the Revs can't sign him to an MLS contract because the Crew have his right.
The Crew is right. So in order to sign him to an MLS contract, we would have to ship some Garber bucks or what have you over to the Crew, acquire his rights, and then get him onto the roster. Again, all of these now have multifaceted layers of everything. For now, the easiest thing is, listen, the Revolution cannot just call up Nick Woodruff whenever we want to play MLS games. We need to have a roster spot for him.
Let's get back onto the listener questions here. TSB11 says, will the front office bring in someone to play next to Luis Caicedo, or are they hoping for improvement from within at center mid? In either case, who are you looking at, inside or outside? Also, Revolution Report asks us, are you surprised they didn't and don't look like they will sign a starting level midfielder?
Yeah, me personally, I was touting holding midfielder. You want the big holding, you want the Jermaine Jones type holding midfielder. That to me is what this team needs. Instead, they went out and got out in Musket. I'm not going to complain. He's a young DP, looks fairly legitimate from what I can tell. We're going to see how well he does in MLS. You've got Carlos Gil playing behind him, Gustavo Bo playing next to him. That's a pretty good attacking trio, guys. We can't really be complaining about this. So now you're looking at central midfield by committee behind Carlos Gil at the number 10 spot. It would not shock me to see a lot more of Kellen Rowe in that spot, either next to Gil or behind him. Obviously, you've got Zahibo, Caicedo, Caldwell already there. You might see a little bit more of Diego Fagundes at that spot because, again, now, Diego Fagundes, there's really not another striker spot. There's not an attacking midfield spot. Winger spots are a little bit harder. What's Diego's situation, which we'll get to, I'm sure, in another listener question. There's a lot of little parts now where you've got about the bulk of the ride, like 9 spots, either starting-wise in the formation. Like you have a good idea of who 9 of the starters are, and then you've got other guys like, is Teal going to be a striker? Is Teal going to be a wing, wide player? You're going to put Kellen Rowe in the middle of the field. You're going to put him out wide. There's little questions like that I think we still have to figure out as we get into preseason, which is what preseason is for. So it's interesting to see how Bruce is going to use those guys and move them around, either based on matchups or based on what he wants to do on his own.
Then you answer like 3 of the next.
Oh dear, I do that. But it's one of those things where it's like there's so many facets to some of these, but it's also like I want to see as many of these guys get minutes because we've seen what they can do. But holding midfield is one of those where it's like it doesn't feel like in this style what Bruce has been trying to do. Holding midfield is just put Scott Caldwell there. He's fine. Don't mess with it. And at the same time, it's like maybe we need someone bigger than Scott Caldwell to just tackle someone. That's why we have Zahibo. So it's like, some of it is you can solve it internally with the guys that you have, and then some of it is like, I need to see what formation Bruce wants to do.
So overall, were you surprised they didn't bring in anyone new? Because it sounds like you were a little disappointed. But
I mean, I was disappointed because I think that this team was firing on all cylinders when it had the spine of Lee Win and Jermaine Jones. When you had that other deep line midfielder that could create, that could hit that killer diagonal, you didn't need, Gustavo Bo out wide and Adam Buska up top. You had Teal Bunbury, you had Charlie Davies. New England has gotten by for a very, very long time with a lot of goal scoring by committee and goal scoring by guys who you wouldn't necessarily think you would want to rely on for scoring. They didn't need superstars at every attacking position. You had an MVP caliber Lee Win player, and you had Jermaine Jones, and a pretty good supporting cast around those guys, and it worked. Well, now you've got the big front end guys. You have the supporting cast behind them. Now we're going to have to see, because this is something the Revolution have never done before, we're going to have to see if those big guns up front can carry this team, or if they're going to need a lot of support from that midfield. And if they're going to need a lot of support from that midfield, now you're going to look at your roster construction and go, God, maybe we should have gotten someone else to help out in the midfield, rather than the people we already have. Obviously, we're bringing back Kellen Rose, very familiar, but I wonder what dynamics New England can produce with what they have, because it could be a lot, or all those combinations could also struggle, because we did see a lot of that last year. So, I have to see really, I think this is a very, very important offseason, and I hope a lot of these types of questions, not so much get answered, but at least we see the possibilities of where Bruce can go if and when he needs to.
Getting on to the point of formations, any Revs UK asks us, with the roster now looking pretty set, what formation do you see the Revs playing day one? I think you kind of answered a little bit that already. Associated with that question here too, Angus says, will there be any unexpected changes to the starting 11 from what is the general expectation? So do you see any surprises coming?
No, I mean, I still think it's going to be some combination of like 4-2-3-1, 4-1-4-1, that, kind of sort of, I hesitate to call it a 4-3-3 because to me that sounds far too attacking, but maybe that's what it'll look like more. To me, a 4-3-3 and a 4-1-4-1 are more or less the same thing. I think the only real question that I would have, Greg, would be, do we think the Revolution are going to deploy two actual strikers? Are they going to put Buska and Bo up top next to each other? Because if they're not, and you put Bo out wide, well, that answers a lot of questions right there. The only questions you're asking are, who is the winger opposite Bo, and what side do they play on? And then who's the midfield behind or next to Gill? Like, that's it. Everything else, like the back, yes, we have questions about the back line. But like, listen, we know there's going to be four defenders. We know Gill's here. We know Bucks is up top. We know Bo's out wide. Those are the things where, like, if it's Pania on the left and Bo on the right, like, okay, well, now who's next to Caicedo? Or is it going to be Caldwell and Rowe next to Gill? Like, it's really not so much the formation as to me, the combination of the players and what Bruce is trying to do with them. If you want a bunch of big bodies and you go with Bo and maybe Teal as your wingers, and you ask Bo to defend a little bit more, maybe that's not a good idea. Maybe you want some other combination of wide players. Like I said, I think New England has the roster flexibility to be able to match up against anyone that they want and say, we're going to take this away from you, or we're going to do this and make you stop us. And they can do that in a lot of different ways. And I think the formation isn't necessarily that important. It's more of what New England does with that formation. I don't care if you call it a 4-4-2 or a 4-1-4-1 or a 4-5-1. The formation doesn't matter. The lineup construction and what the goal is to get the ball forward and what they do in the final third, that's what I want to see. I don't care what we call the formation. I want to see that group of players in action executing a game plan.
Yeah, and another thing too is that I think they have pieces to move people around. Mm-hmm. We could see Diego come off the bench one game and start. We could see Kellen Rowe start with Caicedo in a game they want to be particularly attacking. So I think you're right. There's a number of looks we can see. I still think we're going to see something similar to a 4-2-3-1, which is kind of standard. I hate to be boring.
It's not boring if it's really effective and everyone uses it. Like it is what it is. I think you're right. I think I would love to see New England be able to, over the course of, regular season, U.S. Open Cup run, all that stuff, be able to say, well, you know what? We, Bo just played 3 games in 8 days. Let's sit him because we have enough pieces to where we can give him a day off. And we don't have to just keep, hammering over, 34 regular season games, the same guys into the lineup and tire everyone out by August. I think you're going to see a lot of very good squad rotations from Bruce. I think last year when we saw it late in the year, it was more experimental for we're kind of struggling a little bit, and we also don't know what we're trying to do. And everything for me last year, 2019 was just an extended offseason into 2020. Now you've got this group of players. They've been playing well. You've added a few pieces. Okay, now let's see what we can do, take the next step, executing game plans, creating game plans, and tactically start to maybe dominate some games that otherwise the Revs would not normally do.
Yep, and while we're talking about people making an impact, one person we've named Diego Fagundez. Aiden asked us, will Diego Fagundez find more minutes, and what role, and if so, in what role and what position?
Part of me, between Diego Fagundez and Kellen Rowe, you've got two of these awesome, super sub type guys. I would still think, Diego has a very, very good shot to still grab the starting left wing, left midfield spot, or one of the outside mid, outside wing spots. Listen, guys, Diego Fagundez is a good soccer player. We all know this.
Some people on Twitter don't agree with you on that. Just to warn you, that we're going to get some tweets on that one.
I have written articles and I have fleeced Diego Fagundez for his lack of being able to be a defender, which is what we you have to be a two-way player in soccer, and a lot of times people just aren't. It is what it is. I railed on Diedre Yedlin for years. I'm like, he's not a defender. He's a winger who's playing right back, but he's not a defender. It is an interesting thing because Diego Fagundez and Kellen Rowe, to a certain extent, are guys we don't know what their best natural position is. It's probably center attacking midfield, to be honest, for both of them. But you already have Carlos Gil. You already had Lee Win. Okay, so how are you going to get these guys who are still one of your better 11 players onto the field and being effective? And we've seen Kellen Rowe struggle with that. We've seen Diego Fagundez get benched in a cup run with the same type of, we don't know what your best position is, and right now we need you to help out defend, and you're not doing it. So all of that is in the past. I forget who it is. Might even be Matt Doyle. Someone is touting the Diego Fagundez trade market all the time. I don't want to trade Diego Fagundez. I'd rather sell him, let him go somewhere overseas if that's going to be the case. But I think at some point the Revolution are going to look at what they have and go, maybe we need to take one of the pieces we have. Maybe it's Diego. Maybe it's one of the other attackers, maybe Buchanan, someone. We need to get a midfielder. And maybe that's going to be from an MLS trade, and maybe we package one or two of our guys for a holding midfielder. Whether it's a TAM player from another team, I don't know. I'd have to look at who might be some potential trade possibilities later on in the summer.
Well, the problem with the Diego Fagundez trade, though, is that he's in his contract year, and so essentially they could have traded him 2 years ago,
and you probably should have because you were bad, and you did, or sold him and you were bad and you didn't. Now you're stuck with the expiring contract and the whole thing. I don't know.
There's going to be no value for Diego Fagundez at this point. So we've been touting a Diego trade
for
years.
Not within MLS. No, and certainly that's what I mean. Where it's like, if New England's going to look to package something, it's going to cost them a lot more, and Diego Fagundez could just be, like what we think is the proverbial throw-in, which would be sad because that's not the way I want his tenure to end in New England. But I struggle to think if he's not starting, substitute minutes are going to be very difficult because you're going to have a rotation at central midfield. It's going to be very important behind Carlos Gil. That's probably going to eat up one of your subs. You're going to see a lot of, if Teal Bunbury's not starting, you're going to see a lot of him at the end of games because he can run for days and he plays hard. He plays a lot of defense, and he's going to help shut down a flank at the end of the game. So that only leaves you with one spot off the bench, and there might not just be a lot of opportunities for these guys that are fighting off the bench. And while that's good on one hand, you have a lot of talent, you have a lot of depth. On the other hand, you got a lot of people who are just not playing, and that kind of stinks for them.
Yeah, I think Diego Fagundes is going to be playing in a similar role as he did last year. The only way I think he could see more game time is if Christian Pinilla just struggles, and I might talk about this in a little bit. But I think Christian Pinilla's spot is not necessarily locked in.
No.
I think he's the best person for left wing. But if Pinilla comes out and struggles, a month or two in and is benched, who's taking his spot on the left wing? And I think Diego Fagundes, they'd give a lot of consideration to.
I think Diego would be a very good option. You also, I think you're going to see Bo and him flip-flop anyway, because that's what they do. I have no problem if Bo starts on the left and you have some combination of Teal and Diego on the right. Like you said, nothing is set in stone. There also could be a lot of games where it's like, you know what? Let's put Diego out wide. Let's put Kellen in the middle with Gill. Like, let's put all three of those guys on. Like, you're going to see those types of games at some point, hopefully in the preseason. Those teams could, like I said, this is going to be something that's very fun to watch, both tactically and aesthetically, because this is a team that can create from a lot of different positions depending on where they deploy everyone. I think Kellen Rowe and Diego Fagundes getting minutes at holding midfielder and trying to do their best, Jermaine Jones, diagonal, pinging, maybe not ball-winning badass, but just that guy who can help spring some of the counterattacks that I think this team should be good at. Yeah, why not stick those two guys back there and let them combine and move forward in big chunks of yardage? And then you've got them ghosting into the top of the box and bombing shots in on goal, which Kellen Rowe we know does, for fun anyway. So like I said, there's a lot of ways that this can work out. I think there's a lot of ways you can work out well, but there's also a lot of ways where it's just kind of sort of like, it's fine.
And Diego is almost a victim of that.
He is.
I think it's kind of crazy how far he's fallen down. But anyway, Quite Revs asks us, what holes do you see in this team? Let's start with there. What do you think is the weak spot overall?
You know what? And we did talk about this a little bit, but for me, again, we holding midfield was not improved in the offseason. That doesn't mean it was bad. Doesn't mean it wasn't necessarily an issue, but that's the one position on the field that wasn't improved. Center back was improved. Outside back was improved. Wing was improved. Striker was improved. We've seen over the last year all of those positions get improved. Holding midfield is the one spot that has largely remained the same the past couple of years. That is the one position I still think we need an upgrade on. Do I necessarily think that maybe, is the back line completely settled? No. But we now have far more solutions to the back line than we did several weeks ago or several months ago. We still have the same solutions at holding mid.
Yeah, that's really well put. And, I think my answer to this is I'm still not very confident in the center backs. I think we have a rotation of options, but we lost Jalil Anibaba. We brought in Kessler and Sambatu for reasons we mentioned last podcast. Sean and I are not sold on Sambatu.
But
so
it is,
there's kind of
center back is, it can be a position that at the very least, like holding mid, it's stable. Whereas
it could work, it could not.
And like I said, there's enough options. There's enough options. Like you said, like I don't love Farrell at center back. I'd rather him stay at right back and never have played a minute at center back. But he's proven to be pretty damn capable just playing defense. It's fine.
Yeah, if you were to ask me the weaknesses, I would say I'm still really not sold on the center back combinations, and certainly they played better towards the end of the year. But there's a very good chance that our starting center back combo is Tony De La Mea and Andrew Farrell. And if you had told me that at the start of the offseason, back in October and November, I'd be a little disappointed.
It would have been, well, not only would it have been disappointed, it would have been mildly upsetting to a lot of people. But again, the difference really between the beginning of last year and the end of last year was, beginning of the year, no one was healthy. There was a reason why we were seeing Jalil Anibaba and Andrew Farrell almost every week throughout the summer, because those were the only two guys. You didn't have anyone else. Well, at the very least, now you do have other options. You do have Kessler. You can keep Farrell in the middle as much as I don't want him there. You have now far more depth there. And I think that that's something that last year and for years that they have lacked, is you simply just didn't have enough bodies to play center back if one person went down, let alone two people went down. So at least now at every position, I can point and go, God, we're like two or three options deep at most of these spots. That's a lot better than where we were a couple of years ago.
Quite Revs has 2 more questions here. What can be done to improve fan culture, and just how bad are Adidas kits? And sounds like you have more of an opinion on the kits than I do. Improve fan culture, I say build a stadium.
Yeah,
I think that's a quite easy one.
The stadium thing is the stadium thing. I mean, there's nothing we can do, but you are playing in the morgue. We love Foxborough, we do, as long as the throw ball lines are off of our soccer field. It is still home to the greatest championship banner in the world. That is the 2008 Superliga championship title there below the press box. Fan culture, you need to start cultivating fans instead of catering to youth soccer. That's it. You need a stadium. You need to, if you want fan culture, you need to start appealing to fans. And on the roster front, on the first team front, you are cultivating to fans right now. I can assure you that you are building towards, hey, this roster is pretty darn good. Now you need to start to appeal to people who like soccer, people who are, older than the age of 10 and they can drive themselves to games and can, if they choose to, participate in tailgating and festive adult beverages responsibly. Of course, we would never drive while drinking adult beverages or anything like that. But yeah, that's what it is. The fan culture, I think the fan culture is great, but I also know a lot of the fans. I hang out usually in Eagles gear in the tailgates and interact with everyone, and everyone makes fun of my state, and it's wonderful, and I enjoy it, and it's the best.
Now, what about the kits?
The kits. Everyone knows Adidas is bad. Nike is better. Of all the years you could have done something fun, this is what I'll say on the Adidas kits. All the years you could have done something fun, the 25th anniversary of MLS with all of the original teams having some kind of a funky, weird, bad, 90s-esque original MLS kit. This would have been the year, and it looks like we're getting cookie-cutter Adidas placemats. And it upsets me. Now, does that mean that people aren't going to go out and buy them? No, people are going to go out and buy it. If they want to go buy it, go buy it. Spend your money how you want. Don't judge me, who doesn't buy any sports gear, really, because, well, I live in Connecticut, and all I can find are Giants and Yukon gear. But yeah, it's disappointing from a league standpoint. You could be so much more than the league. You need to, I think, at every opportunity, remind everyone that you're not a single entity Garber Buck awarding organization, and you are a fun, independent, awesome soccer league that's really fun and really enjoyable and is popular worldwide, or we think we're popular worldwide. And I don't think the cookie cutter soccer kits help.
And I hope they have an alternative retro jersey.
I hope there's a third. Man, there should be some
like
kind of a fun. Listen, we all see that picture of Mike Burns 30 years ago, whatever it was, 25 years ago, where he looks the same. He's just wearing a weird, goofy Reebok soccer jersey. Like, we could bring those back. Like, I have one of those weird, funky Revs kits from the 90s in my closet, or like 2001 jerseys in my closet. Like, those things are weird, man. Bring them back.
Absolutely. And who knows? I mean, I would say we could wear them on our nationally televised.
Oh wait, but, we don't have one of those. I forgot about that. We were going to get into a whole hour if we got that. We don't have any damn. And the Fire have like 10. Oh Jesus.
So anyway,
I was happy until we remembered that. Oh dear.
Jared Mishu asked us, who's going to be the sleeper player of the year? And Quite Revs has another question here. Who do you think will perform above expectations and below expectations? So why don't we give a couple players, both who we think will do above expectations and then a couple below?
Oh, that's so interesting.
I can go first.
Yeah, go. I'm going to look at the roster here real quick. Make sure I have who I want here.
The next question too, just so you can prepare all at once, is who do you think will be a diamond in the rough on Revs II? So I'll plant that seed in your head a little bit. But above expectations, the two guys I think will do a little bit better than people expect. I mentioned Isaac Anking. I think he had a really successful season down in Charlotte last year. I know his career has kind of been thrown off a little bit from his infection, his injury a couple of years ago, and we haven't really seen a whole lot of him. But I think Kellen Rowe is really the only offensive kind of central midfielder we have right now, and Anking kind of showed off some really good distribution skills at USL well from what I saw. So I think if Cullen Rowe goes down and Diego Fagundes, isn't forced into that spot where he's a bit of a square and a round peg, I think we could see Isaac Anking kind of show up this year and take some significant minutes and do very well. I think Kessler, as we mentioned, might get some starts here and there. And, as I say, Samba 2, Sean and I are not sold on Samba 2. If he turns out to be kind of a Claude Dielna type of bust, if they need to move Farrell back to right back, if Mancien has injury problems, I do think there's a path for Kessler to fight his way into getting some starts and kind of showing what he's got. So I think Anking and Kessler are two guys that I think will do a little bit better than expected. And if you want a third one, I'll go off a little bit and say Teal Bunbury. I don't think people are expecting anything from Teal Bunbury this year.
Oh, no.
But I think he's going to be one of the guys that comes off the bench and really makes an impact late in games.
Teal Bunbury, I want everyone to remind themselves of this image, because late in the year, Teal Bunbury missed like 3 games. He came off in that injured game like 20 minutes in, like Toronto, and he didn't play for like 3 weeks, and the Revs were miserably bad without him. Like, it was the worst 3 games I think we played during that late season. I don't want to call it a collapse, but the late in the year when the Revs just couldn't get anything going, Teal Bunbury came back like the next week and it was like, okay, look, now we're kind of good at soccer. We didn't get the results, but you can see, okay, Teal's back. We kind of sort of figured it out. So Teal Bunbury is very important. I hope. I know Teal Bunbury is going to get minutes off the bench. I still have a feeling Teal Bunbury, if Pania isn't getting it going or there's problems and the Revolution can't figure out what they're doing with Bo and Buska up front, just go 4-4-2. Put the 2 strikers up front, put Teal on the right side at right midfield. I don't care who you put at left midfielder. Put Caicedo and Gill, diamond flat, whatever you want. Just go 4 in the midfield and just say, like, these are like kind of like our 11 best players, and just go. As far as an under-the-radar move, I think if DeJuan Jones gets minutes at right back, I think that could be very, very fun and very, very effective. And that would be the one spot at the back line where I would say, you know what? If everything else is equal, if Farrell needs to stay in the middle and everything else, and you've got kind of sort of a hole at right back, DeJuan Jones and Seth Sinovic could be the guys that could fill that. I'm very interested to see what Seth Sinovic does, personally. I don't know what his role is going to be, besides, obviously, he could be the number 2 left back. So the Seth Sinovic free agent signing was a very interesting one, because the Revolution seemed to have already settled their left back spot with Butner. Now you're kind of going, all right, well, if left back is set, who's going to play right back? If Farrell stays in the middle, is it going to be Bai? That's an interesting thing. I like the Ankin pick, but I'm going to go with, I don't know where it's going to happen. I want to see Justin Rennicks have a good 2020. I don't care if it's in USL. I don't care if it's in Revs II or Hartford, wherever it is. I want to see Justin Rennicks get minutes and play well. I don't think he had a great 2019. I think he was still learning, adjusting to the pro game. Obviously, the World Cup run was obviously his goal last year, development-wise, which is fine. Go have fun, go be in the World Cup, go beat France. I wanted Rennicks would be the guy. I don't know if it's going to be an underrated thing, but Rennicks would be the guy I want to see succeed this year.
So, and then do you have players going below expectations?
Below expectations would hurt, because I don't want anyone to be below expectations.
I got bad news for you. Jake, because you mentioned DeJuan Jones on your above expectations.
Don't tell me you have him on your below expectations list.
Oh, I think a lot of people are going to be disappointed. I don't know where he's playing this season. I just think from a minutes perspective.
If that's the disappointment of I don't know where we get DeJuan Jones minutes, like, yes, that's disappointing. But we have that question now for a lot of people, and you can't solve that problem at the MLS level for everyone. So you're going to have to ship some people down. And if that means that maybe you've got a week where it's like, you know what, we kind of sort of know the 20 guys that we're using for the MLS roster, let's send 4 or 5 people down and get them minutes at USL 1. And I think you're going to see a lot of that. And you're going to see a lot of those guys get rotated, down. And I hope if DeJuan Jones is one of those guys, then great.
You're making my argument for me here on DeJuan Jones, because essentially the way I kind of see this playing out is Andrew Farrell and Brendan Bai are going to cover right back, so we're not going to see any DeJuan Jones there. We're going to see Sinovic and we're going to see Butner at left back. Fine. So I think what they're going to do is I think they're going to send him to Revs II or potentially to another USL team and try to develop him as a winger, and he's just blocked by so many players. I think DeJuan Jones' best position is as a winger, and I think this is going to be a developmental year for him, and I think that's going to disappoint a lot of people because he kind of was a bit of a fan favorite last year and coming up as an outside back and kind of really starring. But I think DeJuan Jones is not an outside back. I think the Revs see that too. I mean, maybe I'm completely wrong. Maybe he's starting at right back from day one. I don't know, but I could see I could see a situation where DeJuan Jones makes 1 or 2 appearances this season.
That's entirely possible. But if we're talking about, well, he only makes a handful of Revs MLS first team appearances, but he gets, I don't know, some absurd 2,000 minutes somewhere else, I don't necessarily see that as a disappointment. It's just, is it a step down from where he was last year? Yes, but last year was a different situation because at one point we were bad and we didn't have a left back, and we ended the year with a left back. With respect to Edgar Castillo, who unfortunately was hurt and missed a lot of the end of the year. But that was a question mark for New England going in, like, well, God, like, who's the other left back? Oh, it's going to be Jones? Is that a good thing? Couple games in. Oh, yeah, it's fine. That'll work. Late in the season. Oh, he's played like there for like 2 straight months. When did that happen? Oh, he's pretty good at this. So, yeah, is it disappointment that he's not going to play 15 games like he did last year? Yes. Should he be playing 15 games in MLS? No, probably not. That's not something we want him to be doing because, again, it means that bad things have led to him getting those minutes. I have no problem with him developing at a different pace than being thrown into the fire last year, and I think doing pretty darn well, and probably, you're right, overachieving. So, yes, he's going to take a step back. Is that going to be a disappointment? It depends.
Well, and so the other 2 people, I just want to kind of throw this out here too, and I think you might agree with me on these 2, but I have Samba 2 as below expectations, I think, for reasons we outlined last podcast. And Christian Penilla, I think, I have on my list as being someone who, really started out hot in with the Revs, but really the last year to year and a half, I think the results have been a little disappointing. So I think he'll go into the season. I think some people would say they don't have a lot of expectations for Christian Penilla, but that's my list. Juan Jones, I think, will be kind of a victim of circumstance, and then Samba 2 and Christian Penilla, I think, will have some lackluster performances.
Yeah, it's I think Penilla is a bit of a microcosm on the Revs in general because he's very streaky, as the Revs usually are. So when Penilla is finding the score sheet, it's usually like 3 goals and an assist in like 4 games. And I think he's done that like a handful of times over the past few years where it's like, hey, he gets a whole bunch of assists in a row, and then you just don't see him on the score sheet for like over a month. And then you come back, and then in the stretch of like, 3 or 4 games, 5 games, he's got 2 goals, he's got 2 assists, he's got, 15 shots, whatever it is.
He's just inconsistent all the way.
But
around.
Also with some of that is like, well, some of it he's being a sub, some of it he's starting. So it's always hard to kind of sort of gauge. It's kind of hard to sort of gauge where he is. But like I said, there's so many, versatile players and versatile options. I don't have a problem with rotating out who's starting, who's on the bench. All the minutes are not going to be, well, someone's going to play like, every single game. I think you're going to see a lot more balance this year. And Penilla and Jones and Teal, you're just going to see some guys you expect to, rack up a couple thousand minutes. There's just not that many minutes to go around this year.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. But just to wrap up here, so I have on my list Enking and Kessler as above expectations, and Teal Bunbury. You have DeJuan Jones and Justin Reddicks. And then for below expectations, I have DeJuan Jones, Samba, and Penilla. Seems like you agree with me on Penilla. Anyone else? It's a tough ask because you don't know.
Yeah, it's a tough ask. I will say, I think statistically, we should prepare ourselves for Matt Turner not being God this year.
Nope.
I mean, I'm just saying.
Moving on.
We should prepare ourselves now.
No. Moving on to the next place. Yeah, it's just.
I know. I uttered blasphemy.
I consider putting him onto the above expectations because he'll always
listen. I don't know how much more above expectations we can get with Matt Turner. We all love him. We think he's the best.
In terms of the question of who do you think is a diamond in the rough on Revs II, I don't know if you've formed an opinion on this one, and this is just like throwing darts at a dartboard here. But the striker they signed, Malele Malongo, I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly, played 1 year at Salem State, then he moved to UMass Lowell, trained with the Revs first team last year. It seems like a person that the Revs have been keeping an eye on for a while now, since they brought him into training last fall. So he's signed to a USL contract. Again, the likelihood of someone jumping to the MLS team and making an impact is pretty unlikely, at least in 2020. So, it's kind of tough to judge. But of the signings that I've seen, I think Malongo seems like he has some potential, and it might be a bit of a late bloomer, kind of like Tayon Buchanan. I know he kind of fell into the SuperDraft because he was a kind of a late bloomer into soccer. And we hear about Matt Turner too. I think these people that kind of develop in their college age years are kind of where you can find some value, and it seems like Malongo has developed over the past couple of years.
Yeah, the big one for me, I think, is going to be Nick Woodruff, which is the Academy alumni from Michigan State who left college, and he did so not for a homegrown contract, for a USL contract. And I think that's a big step, again, for the Revolution front office, being able to get their academy guys from college into the professional organization, whether it's USL, whether it's MLS.
And on that path, too, the next question here, Revolution Report says, which young players do you see playing with the first team and which do you see playing with Revs II? Are there any players that are too good for Revs II but not good enough for the first team? Just kind of, I think we kind of covered the Revs II players last week.
Honestly, it seems like most everyone is probably, from some of the recent draft classes in particular, and the homegrown guys.
Let me give this list real quick because I think you'll agree with me. I think DeJuan Jones, for the reasons I just mentioned, Isaac Anking, pretty much anyone on the supplemental or reserve roster, Isaac Anking, Tayon Buchanan, Justin Rennicks, Firmino, Damian Rivera, Jeff Caldwell, and then, as I said, DeJuan Jones really is the only player on the senior roster that I can see going down. Maybe you get a cameo here and there from Kellen Rowe or Scott Caldwell, but I don't really think so. It's USL League One, so I don't know what giving them any minutes.
Yeah, no, that's like you said, maybe, but that's already, you just rattled off about like 6 or 7 guys who are like, I would say like would be quote unquote third string type or third on the Revs depth chart, but those are also guys a few of those guys have gotten some significant minutes. Buchanan, I think, is a great option where it's like, where are we playing Buchanan? Well, let's see if Buchanan can play right mid. BA can play right mid. Let's see if he can play up front. Yeah, he can play up front. That's what you can do in the USL with some of these guys. Can we play DeJuan Jones at left mid? Sure. Can we play him at left wing? Sure. Left back? Yes. Right mid? Sure. You're going to see, I think, the MLS guys bounce around and fill holes as needed, and let the veteran guys and the guys like the defenders just be where they are and use the MLS guys to fill in. Well, we kind of need a striker here. Rennicks, go start. Hey, we kind of need a Teal Bunbury type thing going on over here. Buchanan, get over to right wing. That's what I want to see with the USL team. Like, I want to see like the same 5 or 6, 7 guys start, and then the developmental guys, rotating them around and seeing, the MLS guys where you can fill holes and where they can be used at the MLS level. But there's pretty much everyone you just listed, Kessler, Woodruff, all those guys you're going to see for the most part probably get more USL minutes this year than MLS minutes, which is perfectly fine because there aren't enough MLS minutes to go around, particularly for that grouping of players.
And then for the question of who's too good for Revs II but not good enough for the first team, I think Tayon Buchanan is probably the best.
I think you want to see someone like a Tayon Buchanan or Justin Rennicks just go out there and just have like a month where it's like, okay, you are clearly better than this level. And when we notice that, I want to see this organization go, okay, you stop. We're going to get you an actual USL championship level loan. We're going to sort of quote unquote graduate you from Revs II. You can't be here anymore. It's not fair. Get him to Hartford, get him to Rhode Island, get someone over into the USL championship and get them more minutes, and then develop someone else so that you can still use that USL championship level for those tweener guys. If that means DeJuan Jones gets a month-long loan to somewhere, great. If that's Hartford, if that's the future Rhode Island team, if the Rochester Rhinos come back, I don't care. That's going to be another interesting element, I think, that you brought up, and I'm reinforcing it a couple of times here. If you have guys that are crushing it at USL 1, get them into the championship somehow.
Yep, absolutely. And one last question here from David. Does this team have a real chance of winning MLS Cup? I'll let you feel that one first.
You know what? MLS Cup, I want to temper. Listen, we're all excited. We're all very excited. This has been a bad organization for a very, very long time, and we expect them to take several big steps forward this year. That might not be a lot of big steps forward in the standings. That could mean a lot more goals. That could mean a lot more wins. But it might not be, a much higher seed in the playoffs. This was a 7th seed that limped into the playoffs last year, and deservedly so. It was a team that gave up a ton of goals last year, and that needs to be, worked on. And it was in the second half of the year. It was much better. We were only giving up like 1 goal a game or something like that. We need to see this team turn games last year that were, the late equalizers that helped get you a point. Those need to be late winners. And there were a lot of games last year where the Revs could have won them, and they didn't. Particularly, it took them like 4,000 years to clinch the actual playoff spot, even though they were more or less assured the 7th seed since like September. Well, they didn't clinch until the last week of the year, seemingly. That's the step that I want to see them take this year. Games you have a chance to win late, I want to see you win them. Games that you're dominating, particularly at home, I want to see you win those games. Playoff results, deep playoff run, Open Cup run, everything else again is gravy. You took a big off-season step. You ended the season pretty well last year. We know this team can compete with a lot of teams in the league. Now we need to see you take the step of seeing those wins, seeing those games that you can win, turning them into 3 points. Because last year, a lot of them, you were getting no points. You turned a few of them into 1 point. Now let's see you turn it into 3 points. And then, once we've proven that they can do that, okay, now we can start setting our sights on Eastern Conference Final, MLS Cup type level of expectations and talent.
Yeah, but the one thing I'll add, though, here is that I think last week we kind of said that, Sean and I kind of projected where we end in the standings, and we're I think we both kind of settled around 3rd or 4th, maybe in the East. So I mean, that's not
no, it's not. But I mean,
you have a real good chance.
Yeah, no, let me say, like last year they were -7 goal differential and they were 45 points. 4th place Toronto was 50 points and a +5 goal differential. Guys, that is not a gigantic step forward.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if they can carry over that momentum and build off of it. Certainly a lot of questions going into the season, but it will be interesting to see if they're able to take that next step forward. So that wraps us up here today. Jake, where can the good people follow you on Twitter?
They can find me at jcatanese43 at the Bent Musket. I got off work. We did this. I'm going to take a nap, and then we might focus on trying to write a couple things before I go back to work.
I was going to say, anything you want to pitch? Anything we can expect on the Bent Musket?
We did some of the draft coverage. We did some of the draft grades. I would like to again pour one out for the SB Nation mock draft, in which in our preview for the mock draft, I said, hey, it'd be really nice if we got that Kessler guy at 6. I don't know if he'll be there. Hey, look, he was there. I got one right. But like I said, the draft season to me is a wonderful time of year. It means that preseason is opening; it's right around the corner. We're seeing everyone come back to the new training facility, having their team meetings. We've already seen a very happy Kellen Rowe doing an interview with Jeff Lemieux, and if that doesn't warm your heart on a freezing, cold, snowy day in New England, then I just can't fix you. There's something wrong with you. You're broken.
Well, don't read the comments on that tweet. So Kellen Rowe has a long way to earn back all the I think the graduation comments still ring true. Still staying for some people, which is fair. He didn't exactly leave on the best terms, I would say, his first time, but I was going to say it's another opinion. I don't think you speak for all Revs fans.
No. I'd listen as always. The opinions of myself and the state of Connecticut belong to myself and the state of Connecticut, and we mocked mercilessly by everyone else, as is per standard operating procedure on the hell site known as Twitter.
Well, Twitter opinions aside, thanks for joining us. And as I say, you can follow the Bent Musket on Facebook or at the Bent Musket on Twitter. And you can follow us on Twitter at Revolution Recap. And please like our Revolution Recap page on Facebook. Please also leave a review on iTunes or wherever you are listening. With training camp underway this weekend and most of the roster filled out, I don't think we'll have anything really to cover over the next few weeks. So unless there's major news, this will probably be our last podcast until preseason games start up next month, February 10th. So until then, thank you everyone.
And there's no Desert Diamond Cup. How do we defend the Desert Diamond?
R.I.P. I know. Well, we can't. we're still the true champions because we
That's
never.
true. We didn't defend the title. We
for
can't lose the title if we can't defend it.
Yep. But anyway, as always, everyone, thank you for listening, and go Revs.